Weirdings is made possible by listeners like you. Send us your bizarre, your creepy, and true stories either as a written account or as an audio file to stories@weirdings.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first annual Weirdings Halloween special.
Ooh.
I'm John.
And I'm Colin.
And we're very pleased to present a collection of content from our contributors that we've compiled just for this, our favorite time of year.
A collection of tales to chill your bones.
Stop that.
Okay. Thanks for joining us for this celebration of a few of the creepier tales we've seen so far. We hope you enjoy listening as much as we've enjoyed collecting them.
So sit back, grab some candy corn, and keep the lights on for a very weird Halloween. Grandpa Mike, as he wants to be called, is a retired engineer with a background in the hard sciences. He shared his tale with us over Facebook, and not only do we feel that it makes a great addition to our Halloween special, but it's another fantastic example of how paranormal events can occur to anyone, and how even if those events aren't particularly dramatic, they remain just as unsettling. As a reminder, it's my voice you'll be hearing, but the words are all his. Many years ago, I traveled for my job as a technical sales representative in the states of Michigan and Indiana. One of the farthest reaches of my territory was Evansville, Indiana, where I had a large account. But there was little else to call on between there and Terre Haute. My frequent calls in Evansville meant that I often had to drive a long, boring stretch north of Terre Haute where I could pick up the interstate and turn east towards Indianapolis. Along this route, there was a spot that always gave me a shiver. Far back off the highway, nowhere near a town or a settlement, was a large old brick house, which could be briefly glimpsed through the trees and the undergrowth. It was pretty obviously abandoned, but it was such a classic haunted house that it never failed to capture my attention, give me a chill, and make me wonder what the history was. Each time I passed, I felt a tug of curiosity that grew stronger every time, until it became almost an obsession. No, it was an obsession. I had to learn more, to approach the house and find out why it was calling me so strongly. Finally, one late afternoon, I finished my business in Evansville and struck out for my evening destination several hours away in Indianapolis. I wasn't even thinking about the house, but as I approached the stretch of highway where it could be seen, I was suddenly compelled to slow down and seek the obscure country road which led toward the house. This was completely unlike me to deviate from my planned route, especially in a late afternoon, but it was almost like I was acting against my will. I will try and relate a description of what I saw and experienced that afternoon, but now, these many years later, much of it has that quality of uncertainty that is almost like trying to remember a dream. I almost cannot believe myself that I saw the things I did. Of course, the house was in a state of disrepair. No window glass remained. The front door hung off its hinges and thick layers of dust covered everything. Surprisingly, there was still the odd piece of furniture left in the place. The vandals had not taken everything. There was even something I took to be a kind of piano, but with all the legs missing, resting on the floor. The interior was dim, but light filtered in from window openings on the second floor. The house was huge. Rooms opened off to either side of an entry hallway. A wide staircase led upward. By now, my hair was standing up, but I was still compelled to stay and was drawn to climb that stair to find out what was on the upper floor. Now is where my memory starts to get confused and details foggy. I'm not certain how long I stayed, but I am certain of two things. The longer I was there, the stronger was the sense that I had some connection to the place. And second, that suddenly there was an overpowering force of terror and evil present that actually was physically felt. There were sounds. There was movement, and although I do not remember distinctly how it happened, I fled from the place in terror, leapt into my car, and drove madly back down the lane to the road and then to the highway. It was a lot of miles later that I quit shaking and regained some of my composure. I don't know what was in that house, or why I was so mysteriously drawn to it, nor can I explain why that on the one day I finally acted on my impulse to approach it, at the very time that I was inside it, there was a very unusual occurrence for that part of the country. There was an actual earthquake which was felt all over southwestern Indiana. I am scientifically trained and not one to readily believe in things supernatural, reincarnation, other lives, or the like. But the strongest impression I've taken away from that experience is that in some earlier life, I died in that house, and not from natural causes. Not long after that, changes in our business meant I didn't visit Evansville as often. It must have been a year or so later that I found myself on the highway to Terre Haute again and noticed the dark silhouette of the house no longer appeared on its hillside. Sometime later, a person told me that the house had been an orphanage. He lowered his voice and spoke guardedly about awful rumors that surrounded the place for many years. The house was destroyed by fire, and the Hulk bulldozed and hauled away less than a year after my experience there.
Here's a story from Mary, who sent us a few tales via our email, hopefully the first of many. Since it's from our email archive, you'll hear my voice but Mary's words. Listen carefully. Back when I was a kid, I went to my best friend's sleepover. 5 of us decided to have a seance in the living room where we'd all sleep that night. We wanted to talk to a recently murdered boy. When nothing happened, we ended our night and went to bed. Not long after, we started to hear crying. None of us, of course, so we went to the stairs to see if it was my friend's brothers. Their bedroom and my friend's were the only bedrooms upstairs. No doors. Silence. We went to her mother's bedroom door to see if she was watching a loud television show. Silence. We returned to the living room. The crying grew louder. We looked outside. Nothing. The crying got louder now, and we started to hear banging. Loud banging. It might seem like a simple solution, but there were no other kids who lived nearby. I never had the courage of Mary and her friends when I was a kid, but maybe that's for the best.
Haunted115 is a regular contributor to the subreddit R Paranormal. She shared this story with us, and I have to admit, I found it incredibly creepy, even though the events she experienced were fairly subtle compared to some of the other stories we've received. It's a perfect example of how even the smallest paranormal encounters can trigger significant fear. As a reminder, while it's my voice you'll be hearing, the tale is all hers. She calls this tale The Closet. Enjoy. Just before I turned 18, I moved out of my parents' house to live with my boyfriend at the time. We rented an apartment that was the upper floor of an older house. I don't remember anything else odd happening, just a closet in the bedroom. I swear, it only existed to terrify me. I've always had this thing about closets. The doors have to be closed. I hate it when people leave them open. I'm the same way with kitchen cabinets and drawers. If I go to a friend's house, I'll close all the open cabinets. My closet was original to the house. Mine was big enough to step into, with shelves on the left side. At the top was a little door, the kind you push up and over for access to the attic. I also hate those kinds of attic doors. For some reason, the ceiling in my closet was higher than the rest throughout the apartment. You would have to have a good-sized ladder to reach the attic door. I don't know how long we lived there when this first started, but at night, and only during the night, and only when I was in bed, the closet door would open. Very slowly and somewhat creaky. The head of the bed was directly across the room, so if I was on my left side, I was looking right at the closet. I remember the first time it happened. I was home by myself. I'm in bed, facing the door, trying to fall asleep, and I hear the door. It opens painfully slow. I'm thinking, what if someone had broken into the house and had been hiding there, waiting for me to fall asleep? It opens far enough for someone to come out, but not far enough for me to see directly into the closet. The door is blocking my view from seeing in from where I was in bed. I'm laying there in abject terror, waiting for someone to peek their head out. Nothing happens. I jump up, flip on the light. There's nothing there. I figure I must not have made sure it was completely closed and latched. I go over, close the door, make sure it's shut, and that it catches in the latch. Then I pull on the knob to make sure. I turn off the light, get back into bed. I'm all settled in, and my heartbeat is almost back to normal. I'm all comfy cozy when I hear the click of the closet door, and the damn thing starts opening again. Now I'm totally freaking out. I know it was closed properly. This time, I didn't get up. It was probably an hour before I fell asleep, staring at the door the whole time. This only seemed to happen when my boyfriend wasn't home. After a few times of it opening, I decided I would put something in front of the door at night. I found a box of books we hadn't unpacked and placed it right in front of the closet door under the doorknob and made sure that the door was latched. Thinking I was going to get a good night's rest, I got into bed. About 10 minutes later, I hear the click of the door. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Then I hear the door creak as it pushes the heavy box across the carpet, opening it just wide enough for someone to step out, like it had been doing before. Up until that point, I had figured it must be a bad doorknob or latch. Or maybe there was some kind of breeze from the attic or wherever, or possibly even uneven floors. But when it pushed that box of books out of the way, none of the things explained that door opening on its own. Paranormal? Maybe. Maybe not. One thing's for sure, it was super creepy. Luckily, I didn't have to live there for much longer.
In Dansville, Michigan, there lies an old, unpaved road known as Seven Gables. Legend has it that at the end of the road there stood an old house, home to a woman who dabbled in witchcraft. It is said that before her death, the witch laid a curse on her home and the surrounding land. Those who trespass and hear a scream will thereafter meet their deaths. A new contributor, Brandon, tells us of his mysterious experiences on the old forgotten road.
But the time when there was a bunch of us friends who went back there to try to go see the ghosts of the witch that was burned, I've talked to numerous hunters who have actually seen the apparition throughout the woods when they're out deer hunting and hear the screams and the voice, help me, help me. But when we went back there, we had taken a couple digital cameras, and back then, the cell phones really didn't have flashes and good cameras. And the camera I had was a pretty top of the line camera for its time. And so, I don't know, about every 10-15 feet I'd just stop and snap a photo down this trail we were walking. We get to this opening, and all of a sudden there was this, a rock, maybe about, I'd say about as big around as a football, got tossed right towards us, and it hit a tree right next to the woods. And so, I'm freaking out, but then I take my camera and point it towards that route where I heard it. And then we started taking off running. And as soon as I stopped and tried taking another picture, my camera completely went dead. So my buddy, he tried taking a picture. His camera went dead. So something, in my opinion, was sucking the juice out of these cameras and flashlights, because the flashlights all went out. So here we are sprinting in the dark, through the woods. And when we got back out to the parking lot, The cameras had full batteries. The flashlights were working again. So surprisingly enough, we went back to the house and started going through these pictures that we caught. And in two of the pictures, one of them, there was almost like a haze or a fog right in front of the camera that had kind of like a whitish haze silhouette of like a devil's face. And then in the distance, you can see where the trees open up a little bit, and you can see some kind of tall, dark figure, and you can't make out what it is, but you can tell that it definitely has a human shape, but larger, a lot larger. Of course, we see these photos, it freaks us all out, and then after that, it kind of, gets put on disc and gets put away, and were like, yeah, we're not going back there anymore. I know there was one point where a friend of mine had went back there and got back to the parking lot, and right back by the parking lot, there's an open field, and then there's a trail. And in the open field, it was glowing like a neon green color. I guess the easiest way to explain it would be is that if like you see in the movies how a UFO saucer lands and it's kind of lit up in that area. That is exactly what was happening, but you couldn't see anything, you couldn't hear anything. Just the field had a green glow to it. But yeah, I don't know. Dansville's got a lot of history of a lot of bad things happening in that town. Murder and I don't know if anybody's, of course, heard about the burning bed, if they've seen that movie. That happened in Dansville. And then the Octagon House, like I said, that plays a fairly significant role with the Underground Railroad and whatnot. There's a lot about that's kind of a little freaky, but definitely a town where some weird things happen. Just the experiences that I've had, I have no doubt in my mind that there's something that's there, but I don't know that it's explainable other than saying some kind of a paranormal activity that it was just more or less the things that just don't normally happen.
Thanks for the story, Brandon. Hopefully the witch's curse didn't follow you home.
Lilian Speerbrecker had a rather dramatic paranormal encounter. So dramatic, in fact, that the show Paranormal Survivors had her on to tell her tale. We're honored that she met with us to recount the tale and provide us with a little more insight that wasn't included in her on-air telling. The interviewer in the piece is James Barrup. We want to take a moment to apologize about the sound quality. The conditions for the interview were not optimal, but we found her story so captivating that we wanted to include it on our Halloween show. Lilian is also a practicing Wiccan who has worked closely with many Michigan-based paranormal societies. In the time we spent with her, she offered us some significant insight into that world, and while we felt that the content didn't fit the general structure of our Halloween episode, we will definitely make time to present it to you in full in a future episode. You can watch Lilian's television appearance of the show Paranormal Survivor, Season 1, Episode 2 on YouTube. We'll be sure to place a link in the show notes.
My name is Lilian Speerbrecker. Everyone calls me Lily.
I guess if you want to tell the story, and then I'll ask questions afterwards.
Well, they ended up changing a few things around in the TV interview I did.
I bet. I'm sure that they cut some stuff out, too.
They interviewed me for 3 hours.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, they cut a lot out. But what happened was we were living in a house here in Lansing. And Nathan, my ex, my son was talking to him about a little boy ghost being in our backyard. And I knew it was a spirit. I knew it wasn't anything good because I saged my house, I grid my house, so anything negative cannot come past my grid. So if it's staying outside of my house, I know that it's not something, to be messed with.
So I've never heard of a grid before.
Oh, okay. I'm with
I
you.
know sage and I know smudging, but
Okay.
I don't know what you refer to by grid. Is that salting?
It depends on, I typically use stones, like selenite or citrine, and you put it in the four corners of your home.
Oh.
And what it does is it creates a spiritual barrier. Now, good spirits can still come through, it's just the malevolent and evil spirits cannot enter. So, which is why I said, if it was staying outside, I knew that it wasn't good.
Right.
And my son was talking to him about it, and without even thinking about it, my ex told him, he's like, oh, we'll just tell him to come on in. And I was like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
And without missing a beat, Adam, my son, was like, oh, well, come on in. And I was like, oh, this is going to get so bad. It was so bad. So what started happening was, as soon as this spirit got invited into my home, Adam, my son, started complaining that all of his toys were being messed with and being touched and moved around, which I witnessed for myself. Like, I'd power clean my house and I'd leave and I'd come back and toys would be in my living room, but nobody would be home, and I'm just like, oh, here we go again. My things would come up missing. I had a certain chapstick of mine that came up missing for like 2 months, and then after getting extremely angry, I demanded it back, and it showed up on my staircase like 20 minutes after that, and I was just like, okay, well, thank you. My dryer would start by itself, the washer or the dishwasher would start by itself. My ex used to get really freaked out, but I'm like, hey, look, they're trying to do our chores, so don't complain. At least somebody's trying to help me.
Yeah. At this point, it seems like it's not really malevolent even.
Right. In the beginning, it never is. And that's the thing about spirits that come into your home, especially when they try to portray themselves as children, because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to gain your trust to get into the home. And so in the beginning, it started off as like small, cute little things. But then it started turning into shadow figures. Walking throughout my home in the middle of the night, clearly being able to see them through the darkness, because they're like a different kind of dark. And if you can see them in the darkness, it's like pretty intense. I almost walked directly into one in the middle of the night, like headed to the bathroom, like I stopped like just short, and I was like, oh my goodness, like this, no. You know what I mean? I saw one out of the corner of my eye walk past my hall, headed towards the front door. I actually thought it was the father of my kids, because like that's how realistic it, I saw this figure. But it went towards the front door, and then nothing was moved, nothing was touched. I didn't hear anything, so I go look around the corner. I'm like, why is the father of my kids just standing by the front door? And there's nobody there. Father of my kids was in the back of the house playing with their kids, so it was pretty intense. But what really made it, because how the show made it seem was that we got scared of the home and then ran away.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. After I saw the figure underneath my bed.
Right, I want to get that part, because that was the peak in the show.
Yeah, it was extremely unsettling, and I have never seen anything like that. What started it all is Nathan felt a knock under the bed, like right in between his feet. And the first time he actually blew it off. He's like, there's no way. You know what I mean? But then he felt it again even harder. And actually, when it happened the second time, I felt it too and shook the bed. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was just like, just ignore it. I'll evict it, which is what I call it when I sage and get rid of bad spirits. I call it eviction.
Right.
And I was like, I'll do it, the next couple of days. I'm not trying to worry about it. And then, how like you have that little voice in your head that's like, hey, look over in this direction. And it told me to look down towards the right by my feet. And when I did that, that's where this head was. It wasn't underneath my bed. It popped its head up right next to my feet. You saw the bridge of its nose and up. You didn't see the nostrils or anything. So it was literally peeking at me right next to my feet. And this thing was like white. When you describe somebody who turns extremely pale, like that's how you describe them, and that's what it was. It was extremely pale white. There was no eyebrows. The eyes were completely black. It had no hair whatsoever, and it was literally just staring at me. And then I jerked my legs away, and I was just like, oh no, this is happening. And I was like, you know what? I can't freak out, because if I do, then the father of my kids will. And he came from an extremely Christian background. So he's not really a believer in the sense, at least in the beginning of our relationship. And as things started to progress, he started to believe more and more, but I wasn't trying to like overly freak him out. After I put my feet back down there, instead of it being down by the side of my feet, this time it was in between my feet, staring at me. Through the bed? Yeah, like it popped its head up, and it's the same thing, like the bridge of its nose and up.
It was literally through the bed.
Yeah, it was staring at me.
Oh my God.
It was... I yanked my feet back up again, and I was like, you know, this isn't happening. I'm not dealing with it. Eviction starts tomorrow. We ended up leaving the home because the father of my kids got a job opportunity, as well as I did, in Iowa. So we moved to Iowa, and then after about a year, we came back. And that's when we moved into the home in Eaton Rapids. There was more stuff in the house in Eaton Rapids than there was at the house in Lansing. It was pretty intense. Nathan started showing signs of demonic possession. He couldn't keep any of his blessed metals on him. They would either burn on him, or I would find them all over the house. Like they would fall off him. The chain would still be connected, but it would be like in the laundry room or on the stairs, and he'd be wearing it, and next thing you know, it's gone. And I'd find it all over the house. His Christianity, religious artifacts would be messed with and everything like that. He started smelling rotten meat. And so, yeah, it was getting pretty intense for him. What started happening with our youngest child, Caden, is we had him in the bedroom across the hall from us, and there was something about that room. And I lived in that house before. It was my aunt's house, and my cousin used to live in that room. And she used to complain all the time that she could hear somebody walking in the closet. Somebody was banging on the walls and everything. Like, we've heard people coming up and down the stairs. When I lived there beforehand, obviously this still continued when I moved back in with my family. And when we put Caden's crib in there, every time I went in there, the crib was dragged towards the closet door. It didn't matter where I put it. I could put it next to the closet, and it would be pulled away from the wall and drugged towards the closet. I could put it across the room. It would be pulled away from the wall and start being drugged towards the closet. Caden started screaming one night really, really bad, and of course me and my ex ran in to check on him to make sure he was okay. And we go in there, and he has like a string like wrapped like 5 times around his neck.
Oh.
And I was just like, yup, this isn't happening. Nope. But what ended up happening was the relationship between me and my ex started to crumble really bad, because when he would come home from work, he would just be mean and cruel and miserable, and he would take it out on me and the kids. And once he would leave the home, he was fine. Like, he was like his everyday normal self. But in the home, it was like living with a monster.
Things that normally wouldn't bother him all of a sudden bother him.
Yeah, it was terrible. And it's like, what is the next step? You're going to try to murder us? Like, and I wasn't going to let it even get to that point. You know what I mean? Obviously. Yeah. So, but it ended up putting a strain on our relationship. And I was like, look, we need to move, or I'm going to move out with the kids. It was, I mean, we would hear the front door slam shut, and this was an old Victorian home, so the front doors, side doors, everything are solid wood. Right. So if the door slams, you can hear it through the entire home. We would be in the living room, we'd hear footsteps up in our bedroom. Nowhere else, just our bedroom. And like cabinets would slam, my laundry room overflowed with water. The lights would turn on and off. One time they wouldn't even turn back on for a month. Electricians couldn't figure it out. Stomping up and down the stairs. And when I mean stomping, it sounds like coal miners' boots stomping up an entire flight of stairs. It was scary. The kids would see stuff. My oldest son, he heard the man walking in the closet as well. He's like, Mommy, there's a man in my closet. And he's walking around. He's got really heavy boots. And I'm just like, all right, okay, we'll deal with that. And no matter how much I saged, I couldn't get rid of it. Of course, that's when it started displaying, the rotten meat smell to my ex. And only to my ex. I couldn't smell it. And then he started to explain to me, he's like, Lilian, I feel like I'm going crazy. And he's like, when I get up every morning, he's like, his voice talks to me and says that, like, my family hates me and I would be better off without them, and that and it would just say, like, these horrible things to him. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just sitting here like, oh, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, because I'm trying not to freak him out with him smelling those and the religious artifacts being moved around. And then, of course, it's starting to talk to him, break him down. I knew that it was the beginning stage of it trying to break him down enough to eventually take over and possess him. So I was like, look, you need to move, because that's when he started getting insanely mean. Was when it was saying all this stuff to him. And
Lilian and her family did end up moving away from that house in Eaton Rapids. As you can glean from the interview, while Lilian and her ex did not remain together, they did not experience any additional malevolent hauntings after vacating the house. Whether the entity that her ex invited into their life in Lansing was the same entity that attacked her family in Eaton Rapids, or if this was two separate encounters, is uncertain. The house in Eaton Rapids still remains in her family's possession, but the family now rents it out.
This story is the second submission from one of our contributors, Stephen. Enjoy.
Hi, my name's Stephen, and this happened to me in Beaverton when I was 15. We were living in the same hunting cabin at the time, because we didn't have anywhere else to go. When I say we, I mean me, my mother, the stepfather, and my little brother and sister. We had a really nice, beautiful husky dog that pretty much stayed outside, even in the wintertime. And it was my job to go out and feed it every night. In the backyard, there was one of these giant floodlights that illuminated the entire yard, the house, and the front yard. You know the type. Just light everything up. So I go out to feed the dog, and as I'm feeding the dog, he refuses to come out of his doghouse. He's actually whimpering. He will not come out. And I'm getting a little frustrated, so I stand up and I look around to see if there's anything out there that might be a reason for this. And you know how animals' eyes will fluoresce in light? I saw a pair of eyes just beyond the perimeter of where the light was. And I'm looking at it. And it was almost about the size of a coon. The eyes were about that close. A raccoon, they were about that close together. As I go to take a step closer, it stands up. And it's really tall. And the eyes get further apart. And then there's another set, and then another set, and then another set. And that's when I said screw it and ran in the house. Went in, told my parents what I had just saw, and the stepfather decides he's going to go outside and shoot whatever it is and, prove that there's nothing to be scared of out there. He goes out there, you can hear him go, what the f-? There's a couple of gunshots, and then he comes running back in as this screaming starts from all around the house. Literally, it was like we were surrounded. And when I say house, it's more of a trailer that's been built into a house over years and years of constant use and upgrading to accommodate more and more people. He comes in and he's locks the doors and closes all the windows and tells everyone to get down and to just shut the hell up. As the screaming gets closer, and you can hear him banging and scratching and clawing on all the walls around the house, and then it starts to rock. And this goes on all night long until the sun comes up. None of us are really willing to go outside, but we kind of have to make sure the dog's okay. So I go outside, and it's off its chain. The chain had been broken. When I say chain, I'm talking about a big, heavy logging chain. You know, the one that's like a 1/4 inch thick links of steel. It's been broken. And the dog's at the front porch just scared out of its wits. It's covered in its own feces and everything. It's a mess. There are claw marks on the walls outside, all the way up to the ceiling, all the way down to the base, just all around the house. There are no footprints, however. There are no tracks. Nothing to show that anything had actually been there, except for the damage to the exterior of the house. And that's that story.
If you haven't heard Steven's story on episode 2, check it out. It's definitely worth a listen. Thanks again for joining us for this year's collection of spooky stories.
See you in November, and happy Halloween!
Weirdings is produced and edited by Jonathan Barrop and Colin McMillan. Our theme was composed and produced by David Feslian. You can find this track and many more like it at feslianstudios.com. Additional music was provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, Purple Planet Music at www.purple-planet.com, and the Blake Robinson Synthetic Orchestra at syntheticorchestra.com. Weirdings relies heavily on listener contributions. If you would like to provide content for the show, send your written accounts or audio files of you sharing your experience at stories@weirdings.com. You can also contact us through our Facebook page or through the comments on our webpage at weirdings.com. Weirdings can be found on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Facebook, and anywhere podcasts can be found. Tell your friends about us, and thanks for listening.